By 1945, war in the Pacific is reaching new heights of brutality and barbarism. The US has taken back swathes of conquered Japanese territory, and now turns its attention to the ultimate prize, the silver bullet that will bring an end to the long years of bloodshed. The Japanese deeply understands this and knows that the next few months will not dictate military advances, but the very survival of the Japanese culture itself. The place it will make its final stand: Okinawa. Three years on from Pearl Harbor, and the US war machine is finally starting to dominate the Japanese, flexing its military might in all departments of the brutal theater. It's even managing to conduct massive bombing raids on Japanese home soil, culminating in an indiscriminate firebomb attack on the capital city, Tokyo. The raid left 80,000 civilians dead, and 40,000 more wounded. Emperor Hirohito personally surveys the aftermath, and is totally horrified. If these types of raids weren't enough, the US also deployed a naval blockade, pushing the Japanese homeland to the brink of starvation. Through these blockades, the nation is also starved of raw materials, leaving industry seemingly weeks away from total collapse. Despite all this, the Japanese refuse to surrender, and rumors emerge of official policy of suicide attacks, guerrilla warfare, and fighting till the last person alive, even if that happens to be a child. This intelligence leads the Allied powers to the conclusion that the only way to force the Japanese to surrender would be a full-scale invasion of the mainland. To be able to launch this invasion, they would need a piece of real estate close to the Japanese mainland to act as a staging post. Okinawa, just 325 miles away from mainland Japan, was perfect for this. Okinawa would be the biggest piece of land the Americans had taken so far in the Pacific, so in turn, they organized an invasion force, the size of which had never been seen in its military history. They committed a fleet of ships double in size to those which took Normandy on D-Day over in Europe earlier in the war, 1st of April 1945. The assault of Okinawa opens in brutal fashion. The fleet opened fire on the islands with everything they had, with the intention of completely devastating the Japanese defenders. As soon as the bombardment was over, they poured 180,000 troops onto the western beaches of Okinawa. Primarily the assault forces were made up of Marines, and elements of the 10th Army. The battle-hardened Marines expected heavy resistance from the get-go, just as they'd experienced before in battles like Peleliu. Tay had all too recently encountered a ferocious struggle to take beaches, losing countless men and watching the idyllic turquoise waters turn into a crimson foamy swell. However, when the ramps of the landing craft dropped in Okinawa, an eerie silence fell amongst the men. The place was seemingly deserted. By the end of the day, 60,000 men were ashore setting up a beachhead and base for further operations on the island. However, while the Americans poured more men onto the beach, the Japanese army lay in wait, preparing for what their generals dubbed the decisive battle. Although outnumbered and outgunned, the Japanese were convinced that the American people were weak, and if they caused enough casualties, public opinion for the war stateside would plummet. Their ultimate aim is to force the US generals back into negotiations, but this time with more favorable terms for the Japanese people. While the Americans creep forward into Okinawa, the Japanese General Ishijima and his staff watch on, almost excited about the sheer force of the counter-attack they are about to unleash. They watch as the Marines head northwards, whilst the army divisions head south, looking for any Japanese resistance. Little did they know it was about to be found. On the 6th of April, the Japanese unleashed their secret weapon. Hundreds of planes approach Okinawa. However, these are not ordinary attack plays. As they approach the American fleet, the pilots nosedive, attempting to slam themselves into the ships head-on. The primary targets were aircraft carriers, with the main aim being to cut off the ground troops' ROM resupply and fire support. The kamikaze attacks last for 5 hours, with countless attempts at suicide. 22 kamikazes achieve their goal, sinking 6 ships, and killing 320 US crewmen. Whilst they did not achieve their goals, they managed to instill fear into American generals and remind them that blood will have to be spilled for every inch of Japanese soil. Back on the land, in Okinawa, troops from the US Army come within a few miles of Shuri Castle, the official HQ for the Japanese in Okinawa. What lay in wait was concentric lines of defense, culminating in the Shuri Line. In what was regarded as standard American tactics, They attempted to smash the line with artillery and attack head-on, which was exactly what the Japanese generals wanted. Gaining territory was slow and painstaking, and every inch cost American lives. The Japanese have taken the high ground for their artillery, and kept the US heavily pinned down. 60 miles of subterranean defenses and machine gun posts also lay in store for the Americans, and were almost impregnable. It creates one killing ground after the next which have to be cleared one by one. American commanders plead with the general to halt the attack and try a second landing behind Japanese lines, in an attempt to draw attention from the frontal assault, but he refused to listen. The scenes are entirely awful, with some of the closest fighting scenes since WWII. A lot of it being hand-to-hand. The battle saw the highest amount of shell shock for the Americans in the entire war, with 20,000 troops having to be pulled out suffering from the affliction. The battle was about to get even more deprived and barbaric. As the American forces pushed through the Shuri line, they were to become aware of new Japanese tactics which would horrify them. Children as young as 6 were being used as fighters, suicide bombers and human shields. Mothers were told to kill their own babies if they cried in the caves whilst hiding. Reports of this head home to America and highlight to the people how deadly the next phase of the war was about to be. In Okinawa, the doctrine of no surrender was in full flow, and the casualty rate grows by the minute. Continuing the brutal assault, the Americans pushed the Japanese into small pockets of the island. Until, on the 22nd of June, the Japanese general commits ritual suicide, signifying the end of the brutal 83 days of fighting the US forces had ever seen. 100,000 Japanese soldiers are dead, along with 50,000 American casualties. 386 US ships are damaged and 36 ships have been completely sunk. The battle redefined warfare and proved to American high command that everything had to be done to avoid a full-scale invasion of Japan. The battle can be summed up by the quote, "The Battle of the Okinawa was the only one that left the losers emboldened, and the victors depressed."